Everybody ready?
I did think about correcting him. It's a good form.
Welcome to the December 15th Eugene City Council work session. And so this truly is Jennifer's last council meeting. Although the State of the City, I guess, is the official, but this is the last time you'll be sitting around at this table.
Unless someone asks for a special meeting. You'll be worth anything.
Unless Pat resigns and asks her to take his place.
So again, we just want to, not to be repetitive, but to be fully recognizing the time that you've given to our council and to our community. And on behalf of all of us, we just thank you very, very much and wish you all the best. And see that smile grow every day.
Hear, hear.
So let's.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
You want to say anything?
I do plan to say something at the State of the
Okay, well,
City.
hold off okay. Otherwise, we'll just keep milking this thing for...
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on now to our first action item, and we're revisiting our interrupted conversation on street assessments, and Glenn's going to tell us where we are and what we need to do here. So,
Thank you, Mayor. So you had the main motion on the table, and that's shown on your amended agenda. And then Alan had the conceptual amendment related to prioritizing any deferrals for low-income and seniors before the deferral would kick in under this new provision. What I emailed out last night and what you have on the green agenda is how technically we get there. It would replace subsection 1 of section 7.913 in the ordinance. If you brought your ordinance from the other night, that would be council packet page 191 is where that occurred. So we're removing the old subsection 1 that talked about deferrals. It would be replacing it with this provision here, and what that would accomplish is what, Alan, you had asked for. It would prioritize, not enough money, seniors and low-income individuals would get the deferrals before there would be any other deferrals under this new provision. That amendment is now on the floor. So you can discuss the amendment, you can amend the amendment, then vote on the amendment. Once you've voted on the amendment, then you go back and vote on the main motion.
okay, thank you. So before I call on folks, my main question, Alan, is, and for all of us it's rhetorical, I guess, in that sense, but my question is that not all seniors are low income, so you're putting them at the head of the line, but you may be putting at the head of the line folks that are not in significant need of help, more than anybody else. So that's just my concern when I think about this. Andrea.
Can we have Mark speak to this?
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. That was in line. Sorry, I think I'm first.
I didn't get to speak to the motion, but...
Well, I asked to speak first, and I suggested that George and Jennifer get to speak next, second, and third, because they were on the committee that spent hours on this. First, I want to say that I, as much as anyone, think we don't have to accept what a committee or commission recommends to us. Even though they have worked hard, we don't have to accept it. We can put our own thoughts into it. But I would hope that people would at least try to understand or ask why we decided something. We did spend a lot of hours, and we did send staff back to get more information for us, and we considered objections to everything. So I would hope that you would at least try to understand why we are recommending what we are before you change it. As for this amendment, I want to emphasize people will not take advantage of deferring the assessment unless they need to. And we don't know who needs to. It's not something you want to do, to be paying interest every year and have a lien on your house. I did ask staff to check and see if lots of people take advantage of the senior property tax deferral. Most people don't. They won't do it unless they need to. And I think it would just be complicated to ask people to prove that they need it, and you don't know what other people's obligations are or their commitments. Like, I knew a family who were supporting, who looked prosperous, but they were supporting a whole family in another country. And nobody wants to have a lien on their house, and all this does is letting them postpone it just lets people be secure. They probably will choose not to do it, but if it's a question of losing the house or deferring payment, they have the choice. And I don't think it should depend on age or income that we can watch or measure. It should depend on them. And I know lots of people, including me, who could have been deferring their property taxes because of their age, and people don't do it unless they need to. And I do not do it. And I don't think people will defer this payment. It will help probably a few people, and I've heard from a few lately who are really scared that they may have to move out of their houses. And I hope that you will defeat Alan's motion, however well-meaning it was. And that's all I have to say for now.
Andrew, you're next, and Alan, you can speak to your motion
Well,
after that.
I'd like to ask Mark, so this was a part of the old process that you'd had for the same ordinance, is that not correct? Or something similar for deferrals?
If you look at the different steps through a local improvement process, we ask people to apply for the low-income subsidy that's in the existing code at the time of the local improvement district is formed, and then we ask them again before several months before after construction is completed and several months before assessments are levied. And so it requires proof of income, which is really your income tax returns. And it takes some effort on finance's part to review and approve those. And so that's all done before we get to the point of levying assessments. The change in the code really is going to occur after that point in time, and when someone is making that decision, they get the notice that the assessments have been levied by a council ordinance, and they get the notice that it's due in 15 days. You either pay it in this new provision, you could defer it, or you could finance it through the city. So this new provision is really at the tail end of the process. So it's not. So the amendment really doesn't affect how we would. It doesn't put the people that are choosing to defer payment until they sell their house up against the people who are choosing to receive a low-income subsidy, because we've already made that decision long before, several months before, people are making that choice to defer. What the amendment really does is if you get to that point where you have 10 people that are going to choose to defer per this change in the code, and you can only afford to allow 9 people to defer, it allows everyone to defer a portion of it and pay a portion of it. So it prorates that if you get to the point where there's insufficient funds. And it doesn't preclude the council from allocating additional funds to make it available to everyone, assuming that at that point there would be a source of those funds.
Okay, so that makes it a lot more clear. I'm cognizant of the fact that, I think Alan's trying to do the right thing here, and I'm just trying to decide how this benefits us or benefits the community. And it seems like, I personally feel like, just in dealing with the community on Elmira Road, that, everybody is really happy. I haven't had one person, when I've met them at Winco, say to me, I have to move because you guys, fixed my road. So I get a lot of people thanking me and are glad. A little bit of complaints about the speed bumps, but so I'm just I just don't know what this will accomplish.
Well, it's one more opportunity. So if someone didn't qualify for a low-income subsidy,
Okay.
for whatever reason, but still financially they couldn't afford an assessment or chose to, they could defer it until the property was transferred or sold. Mm-hmm. So in the way the decisions roll out in the timeline, we decide on the low-income subsidies before we would decide on if there were sufficient funds to allow someone to defer the payment until they sold their home.
Okay. I think
You're good?
I'm good, thank you.
Hey, Alan, you want to?
So the low-income part happens before the assessment happens, right? But not the seniors?
No, that would happen as well.
So they're both before the assessment happens?
Well, excuse me. The seniors can defer any time. If their property's assessed and they start to pay it, they could make a decision 5 years into the 10-year payment plan to defer.
Right. But in terms of priority scheme, the low-income and the seniors are in the queue first before they do the assessment, and then everybody else, right?
Right, except for, in the example I said, a senior could choose to pay their assessment
too, right.
and then change their mind 5 years later when they still had 5 years of payments.
So what I was attempting to do here was prioritize what we already have, which is an existing ordinance which says the seniors and the low-income folks have this ability to defer. What we've done is added everybody else into the pool. And that potentially could be a big group. And coupled with the fact that we have very limited funds to do this. I think before Crest Drive we had $600,000, and after Crest Drive we're probably going to be in the $300,000 range total for this fund. So it's not a very big chunk of money. And likely on the next one it probably won't deplete the funds. But in the second and third assessments, that this fund could completely go away. By adding in everybody, it has the potential to deplete it a lot faster than we're doing right now, because we added everybody else into this pool. When I was working as a power manager at EPUD, we did weatherization projects for people, and they were $5,000 to $10,000, and we allowed them at the very beginning of the process or the program to put it on their property as a lien, and when they sold, they paid, thinking that on average we'd get them back when houses turn over on a 7-year period. Well, it turned out not to be the case. People who did this never left their houses, and 15 years later we still have all of these people, like 95% of them, and they didn't turn over. So the revolving fund we thought would happen never occurred. And so actually we stopped doing that because it ended up being a bad idea. We just had this liability sitting out there, or this accounts receivable sitting out there for years and years and years and years. So my fear here is that by adding everybody into this pool is that we will eventually deplete the deferral monies that are available for seniors and low-income folks faster than we might otherwise. Even with this, we could do that. So I think that's what I was trying to avoid, and without actually deleting everybody getting the ability to do the deferral. I don't know how to protect seniors and low-income folks from this depletion of this fund.
Chris?
So if I'm understanding what you're trying to get at, then we're acknowledging that what we're going to be doing is increasing the pool, that many more people can now qualify for this, and for the limited, yeah. And so what you're doing is you're saying, I don't want to change what's going to be going forward in terms of the size of the pool that could be here. What you're wanting to do is to say the order of people within that pool. Certain people would be at the front of the line within that pool. Right now the pool is first come, first serve, or whatever the system is. But you're saying, I would like to give priority within the pool to seniors and low-income folks. If it's a matter of saying that a certain category of people might be at the front of the line, but the line hasn't really changed, is that what you're...
Well, the line could get substantially bigger because we added everybody into the line now, potentially. Not everybody takes advantage of this, as Betty said, but apparently now we've allowed everybody in. Before, we didn't allow everybody into the deferral program. It was a limited number of only seniors and low-income folks. Now, every street on the street assessment program is eligible.
Right,
and they could deplete the limited amount of money.
And whether we pass your amendment or not, that part is going to be there.
Yep.
Okay. So the deferral piece is already in place. The only thing you're doing, if I understand, is adding a provision that says seniors and low-income people can be at the front of the line. That essentially it?
Yeah, that's what I think this does.
I can appreciate, I think, with regard to maybe low-income folks, the question is the determination of what that is and how you work that out. I think with regard to seniors, I think Betty's point is well taken. This is not about age, it's about money, because that's what street assessments are, as a function of money. And so a low-income provision might be worth considering. I don't think I would necessarily need to have a senior provision in here, because...
We already do.
Huh?
We already do, though.
But if the pool changes, what I'm saying is senior provision to get to the front of the line. I don't necessarily have to have a senior provision to be at the front of the line, but I think if there was a consideration for people who are in some sort of a low-income category, I might be willing to think about that. But I think overall, I would like to hear what my colleagues think about the notion of allowing low-income folks to be at the front of the line as long as the pool provision is not really changing. I'd be curious to hear what they have to say about that.
Jennifer?
Okay, Mark, if I remember correctly, the seniors and the low-income folks are eligible for a subsidy.
That's correct. Well, the subsidy program is purely based upon income without regard to age.
Right. Okay, so, but I believe that our discussions were, you can get a subsidy, but not a subsidy and a deferral.
That's correct.
We established that. So low-income folks have a chance at a subsidy, and so then that leaves the pool for everybody else. And I want to be really sensitive also in this economic climate to folks who might not have a job. They're not low income today, but next month they could be zero income, but still their tax returns won't reflect that, and that could cause a lot of stress for those folks that are barely making their house payment. And so I want them to, who are not necessarily low income, to be able to apply to the pool for the deferral. And that's why I will not support Alan's motion.
Okay. Mike, did you want something to say?
Jennifer just covered it.
Okay. So I don't have anyone else in this round, so we're going to vote on Alan's proposed amendment. All those in favor, please indicate. 1 in favor, in opposition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in opposition. It goes down. We're back to the main
Did I
vote.
win?
Did you win?
Depends on how you're keeping score, Alan.
Back to the main motion.
Do you want, shall I restate, or do you want to, are we
I
discussing
think
on
we're
that?
okay.
We are, it's already been made.
I just wanted to, for the sake of discussion on the main motion, say that the provisions that allow for assistance with assessments are something that I actually asked for up front when we had this discussion about assessments previously, that I think that what's been done in that regard are very much needed to make the policy better, and I appreciate the work done by everybody on the committee. I just wanted to make it really clear that I'm going to vote no because of the fact that there is only one portion of this that I think is unjust. And I know that I don't have, my typical behavior here would be to try and offer an amendment like Alan did to try and change this, but I know that the votes aren't there, so I'm not going to waste your time. But I really would like to vote for the rest of this, but this seems to be based not on where your home is and what you have a duty to pay for based on where your home is, but on who's driving on which street. And I think that we're taxing some people because they have to drive on a street, and we're not taxing other people who also have to drive on that street. The basis on which we're determining who has a liability, I think, is flawed and unjust. So I'll vote no.
I think we're ready to vote on the main motion. All those in favor,
Mayor,
please.
before you vote, I don't think this will matter, but just in case it matters to anybody, this ordinance requires 6 votes to pass.
All right. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In opposition, 1. It passes.
Did I win?
It passes 6-1. You and Alan are the big winners in this. No, sorry.
You're winning for the team.
Alan.
Did the conversation at the group talk about that limited pool of money and potential sources to increase it? Because $300,000 isn't a lot of money, although we don't have a lot of street assessment projects that go forward. But
We talked about everything, Alan.
That's the answer.
a non sequitur answer. So the answer is no.
What's that?
There's no money. There's no a reasonable plan.
I think we're ready now to move into the second item on our agenda today,
That runs out.
and that's the Envision Eugene update, economic prosperity. And before I turn it over to City Manager, and welcome everybody to the table from this citizen group, I just want to express, having just spent the major part of, not as much time as you guys did, but the major part of 2 days in meetings, I really value the time this enormous group of people have spent in this process. And I don't think they would have spent it if they didn't think it was really important work to do. And so I just want to express my acknowledgement of how much time so many people have given from so many perspectives. And we're still, this is a collaborative process, and the value of a collaborative process is you're working toward finding a common direction that you want to go. The downside is it takes a lot of work, and the closer you get to the end, the harder it gets. And that's just sort of the nature of as you work your way down to the end game. And everybody starts out getting antsy, they get better, then they get antsier again, and that's kind of the way it works. But I think I want to have express confidence in the amount of intellectual capital that's being spent in this process, and the amount of real caring for our community and the future of our community and the generations to come that are in this process. And I just wanted to say that because I've been there and seen how much time and energy on the part of our community members and on the part of our staff have gone into this thus far. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and we're in a bit of an antsy time at the...
Yeah, that's right. That's what I wanted to acknowledge the antsiness and just say it's kind of a natural part of that process, even though it's painful.
I want to just introduce the CRG members at the table. If you don't know them, Bill Aspergren, over here, Ed McMahon, Sue Pritchard, and Laura Potter. As I mentioned in an email of a couple weeks ago, as we go through the next few work sessions, particularly, what we're wanting to try to do is build a foundation of information for people, and that information really around initially economic prosperity, social equity, and environmental protection. And part of it is just to continue the iterative process of building information, sharing the information, ensuring we all have some of the common basis on which all of you will be able to make decisions from it. So that's what we're trying to do, is start to build that. As I mentioned also, we will be inviting CRG members to the table because I think they can offer their perspective on whatever particular topic we're talking about at the time. And as the mayor suggested, they're investing a lot of their intellectual and capital as well as their time into this, and add a tremendous amount to the collective wisdom of the process. And so I want to make sure they have an opportunity to be a part of that also. I think there was one other thing. I forgot.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah, I was going to mention something else, but it'll come back. So today what we'll start off with is economic prosperity, and have some conversation about that. We are not presenting solutions or strategies or tactics today. This is really just information building, an opportunity for you to ask questions, get more information, give us feedback, which then we will continue to incorporate. There will be a time when we're going to come back and talk about strategies and tactics. As I outlined in the previous email to you, we will be starting to do that, but today isn't the intent of that. And I know, Mike, you have a presentation to give, but I just wanted to give one update related to economic development on the LCC downtown campus. They're continuing to move forward very aggressively on their plans. In fact, just yesterday, they did sell their almost $20 million worth of federal recovery zone bonds, which is an important part of the process, so that's great. Their board has also decided to expand their housing from 4 floors to 5 floors, which also is a real positive. They're anticipating submitting plans in for review right after the first of the year, and then starting to actually see some work out there as early as March. Now, that'll be...
What's the equipment that's out there right now?
Actually, there was a boom truck that was on the site for 2 days. They thought about building a ramp to take a drilling rig down into the hole, to the development site, and the cost of doing that and removing all that was a little bit too onerous, so they actually lifted a drilling truck with a boom into the development site, and then they took it back out.
Okay.
So they've been doing drilling. I believe that's connected with the geothermal wells.
Okay. So it is part of the...
Yeah, it's part of that project. So they're moving aggressively. I give a lot of credit to Mary Spieldy and our team for really trying to work through that. But just kind of an update related to economic prosperity, different topic. But I'll turn over to Mike for...
And you're going to show
presentation.
something up here, Mike?
And I am going to ask you to move, but we
I'm
won't
gonna
need
move
a
my
boom
head
truck
right
for
out
that. It is wonderful to see a couple of pieces of heavy construction machinery downtown, and hopefully we'll have the problem of having too much under construction at the same time, which has typically not been our issue. So, good afternoon. And today what we're going to do is we're going to provide the council with a briefing on economic prosperity, and this is laying the groundwork for the future discussions that you're going to have around Envision Eugene, and hopefully this information will be important and useful to you. We're going to review 3 topic areas briefly. First, we're going to look at some trends and issues that shape the local economy. You can look at this sort of as a problem statement. Next, we'll review the work that you did as part of the joint elected officials on regional economic development goals and strategies. And these are the strategies to address those regional issues, which we all have seen over the last few years. And lastly, we're going to relate this information back to Envision Eugene and some of the work of the Community Resource Group, the CRG, and your future discussions and agendas. And I'd like to start with just a couple of observations about the local economy, starting with unemployment. And this is we're all aware of this problem, and it's a problem really on a national scale. National jobless rates, which are coming up any time, there we go. National jobless rates had actually been at a relatively positive level back in the middle of this chart around 2000 at 4%. And of course, we all know that during the economic downturn in 2008 and beyond, there was a spike nationally in unemployment, and that's leveled out in October at about 9.6%. Oregon's performance in that same time period follows the trend line that we see nationally, though it reaches a higher peak in 2009, and it retreats back to about 10.5% again in October. The local unemployment picture is similar, though just a tad different. Our peak was painfully high back in 2009 at 12.8%, and our current rate at 11.1% exceeds both the Oregon and the national rate. Unemployment issues, gratefully, tend to be cyclical. Our region has some other problems related to average wage and family income, and unfortunately these issues are a little bit more stubborn and persistent. The story on wages is actually a relatively simple one. Looking back 35 years ago, wages between the state, between the state and the local area were relatively on a par. But over that period of time, local wages have not kept pace with average wages in the state. Our current wage level, which is a little bit, average wage level, which is a little over $35,000, is a full 16% below the average wage for the state. There are some profound impacts that are felt throughout the community based on this wage situation. Next. The poverty rate in our area in 2009 stood at 17.4%. Full 20% of households received public assistance. 34% of households reported having very limited financial reserves. This next one is a little bit cryptic. 37% of households in our area pay in excess of 30% of their income for housing costs, and this meets the definition of being housing cost burdened, which is a problem that causes other problems for families. 40% of children in the 4J school district are eligible for free or reduced lunches, and in the Bethel district, 60% of children are eligible for such programs. There are multiple factors that contribute to the region's low wage profile, but our economy's drift away from manufacturing is certainly a big piece of this puzzle, and it's a well-known story. Our economy, like many other regions, has evolved over the years away from a traditional base in manufacturing and towards a deeper reliance on the service sector. You'll note here that manufacturing, which was at around 22% back in 1978, has seen a decline to 17% in 2000, which is where this particular graph ends. The current rate, the share of manufacturing employment for this area is about 9.2%. During that same period, the service industry actually almost did the inverse. From a starting point of about 17% back in 78, service employment has expanded on this graph to about 28% by the year 2000. That is a little bit of an anomaly in the way service jobs are counted, and it's difficult to untangle. The current portion of employees that are classed as service in this area is actually 53%, but it's a much broader category than was used back here, and so it's difficult to use those as comparables. You'll note that this evolution follows the same timeline as the region's reduction in average wages. And this next slide is just a quick comparison of pay rates between manufacturing and services. For this purpose, we've actually constructed a composite of services, and it's noted below. Those are retail, leisure and hospitality, and other services. What's excluded, which appears to be included on the state statistics, are a broad range of financial and business services, as well as some healthcare services. So those are relatively well-paying service jobs. These are relatively low-paying service jobs. And you can see, this is chronological from 2001 to 2009, you can see the gap is relatively enormous. This provided the backdrop for the starting place for the JEO, again, the problem statement that the JEO is looking at. And the challenge at the beginning of this process was not to return to an economy of the past, not to bring back something that may never come back because things have evolved, but to set a strategy that can lead us in a positive direction towards a more positive economic future. And the JEO set some ambitious goals, as you'll recall. The first one is creation of 20,000 net new jobs by the year 2020. Secondly, to reduce the local unemployment rate to or below the state average. And thirdly, and without a doubt the most ambitious, given our current position, increase the average wage to or above the state average for our region. Beyond that, the JEO set out strategies which I'm sure you're familiar with, you'll recall. The first is grow local opportunities, which is the notion of encouraging local expansion and startups. Energizing a creative economy, which is encouraging emerging technology, idea-based enterprise, and sustainable businesses. Talent for Tomorrow, which is a workforce development strategy, providing for basic business needs, which focuses primarily on infrastructure and the site development needs of our local businesses. Identify as a place to thrive, which is the notion of fostering a new economic identity for the new economy in this area. And lastly, strengthening key industries, which is a targeted cluster strategy, and we'll get back to that. I'm going to focus on three strategies that are directed specifically at business and job growth, and those are the local opportunities, creative economy, and key industries. Next, when we discussed the JEO work with the Community Resource Group, We use this descriptive graph to illustrate the likely volume of economic opportunities and development focus within each of these goals. By far, the best opportunity for wage and job growth is likely to come from working with existing companies, expanding those companies, and local startups. Secondly, creative economy. Startup, entrepreneurial, creative businesses should be an important source of economic vitality and link our economy to sustainability, emerging technologies, and innovation. Lastly, the targeted industries. These companies could be significant employers, but they're also likely to be a source of far fewer opportunities. I just want to give you some examples of some of the companies that we've worked with that fit into these categories. And in these cases, these are companies that have either received a loan through the city's Business Development Fund or have worked with us in the Enterprise Zone program to help promote their expansion. First is Shelton Turnbull, which is a long-standing company in Eugene and now an employee-owned company, and the city made a loan that helped them restructure their financial situation. Lance Cabinets, a company in West Eugene that has expanded several times with the help of the Enterprise Zone program. Comotion Cycles, manufacturer of specialty bicycles that received a Business Development Fund loan sometime in the past. Bike Friday, which received some of its first financing through the city's program and has actually received several rounds of financing as they have expanded in West Eugene. Arcimoto. Now, this is a specialty product, and it's a product launch. This is a startup manufacturer of electric cars. The city made an early loan to them as part of their initial capitalization, and we have great hopes for them. And lastly, Helitech. Talk about specialty. This company provides helicopter repair and services, recondition, and does some parts manufacturing, and they received some financing through the Business Development Fund as well. Moving on to creative companies. Our creative economy as it currently stands spans a wide variety of business types, and as a group they hold great promise in emerging technologies and sustainable enterprise. Some examples of local companies that we've worked with: Avant Assessment, which doesn't show very well here, but it's a computer company, and they actually do language learning and assessment tools, and they have a national and international presence. They started on the university's research park. They're actually expanded and moved downtown, and they've received financing through the city's Business Development Fund. Molecular Probes also doesn't show very well. Molecular Probes is one of the very early recipients of a Business Development Fund loan. Subsequently, they were purchased by Invitrogen, and subsequent to that, by a company, Life Technologies. They continue to be a leading biomedical firm in their marketplace, and they continue to be a local company and a very important company. Electrogeodesics, which takes the greatest pictures. They do advanced brain imaging. They're a company, again, that started on the research park and received financing through the Business Development Fund and are making great progress in imaging technologies. Something completely different, mycological natural products. You might think that these look like brain parts, but they're actually specialty mushrooms. This company is a processor and distributor of specialty mushrooms, recipient of a Business Development Fund loan. Important aspect about this company, they actually network together a lot of people who gather mushrooms in this area. They provide that processing, and through them provide access to those markets that reach well beyond this region. And lastly, Florogenics, a company that's still on the University Research Park, though they have recently also opened a branch of their operations in Portland. They provide advanced genetic research services for plant species breeding, and it's a significant company. The last strategy that I'd like to mention is the key industries. Key industries, these are targeted sectors or clusters that we're looking to for future business growth and development. Okay. And some prior work was done prior to the work of the JEO that kind of set us up for a natural selection of key industries. The Workforce Partnership identified clusters or sectors, however you want to use those terms, where the region has an established presence and some form of advantage that leads us to believe that this may be a way forward, at least in these areas. You also notice on the bottom of this chart, we have the county's average wage, and then we have the comparable wages of each one of these cluster areas that were chosen, first researched by the Workforce Partnership and then chosen by the JEO. So moving on, translating that into the JEO's cluster targets, the first one is clean tech and renewable energy. Secondly, health and wellness. Thirdly, advanced manufacturing. And advanced manufacturing is a broad category that takes in essentially any manufacturing process that is technologically rich and typically in innovative markets because of the capital investment necessary. Beyond that, software, if you'll recall the chart before, performs very well in terms of average wage. And lastly, biomedical. With that background on the prior work that's been done by yourselves and the JEO and some of that economic background, I'm going to pass the baton to Jason, and he's going to relate these economic issues to some of the land use considerations that we're currently working with and the full agenda of Envision Eugene.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to quickly kind of walk you through, put you in the time machine back to ECLA. We'll talk a bit about how our land supply helps, how it meshes up with some of these things that Mike just talked about. And that hopefully will give you some insight into what that means. So as you recall from ECLA, we were able to categorize those lands that are considered vacant and developable. This is just a quick map of where those are. I will walk through a bit in more detail where our industrial lands are relevant to this map. But again, just as a reminder, these are tax lots with less than $1,000 of improvement. They aren't committed or protected, which means they aren't government-owned property, they aren't schools, they aren't protected by any of the city's natural resource protections. And also as a note, this inventory was done as of December 2008. That is, we closed the data and everything that had been developed to that date helped inform this map. So clearly some things have happened since then, and there's kind of constant refinement of this as development continues to occur. So when we talk about the three areas that Mike touched on, when we talk about growing local opportunities and the creative economy, those two industries in particular or sectors oftentimes intersect with our commercial land. So this is just a quick sketch of what our commercial land supply looks like. So it includes office and retail type uses in the city, and we currently have about 88 acres that are developable. If, as you recall from ECLA, if the city continued to grow in the way that we had, and based on the state's employment forecasts for Lane County, we would need about 486 acres of commercial land. So it gives you a sense for the fact that we have 88, we would need 486. So these commercial lands could account for some of the job growth that we're talking about. So what we've heard from the Community Resource Group as it relates to commercial lands, again, this is not these aren't recommendations. These are snippets of some of the conversation that we've heard. Look downtown. Already some of these industries are locating downtown, but are there more opportunities in the downtown area for some of these jobs? Look to redevelopment of key areas where there may already be clusters of industries located, or areas where economically and in terms of land price and land value, there may be kind of good bang for your buck to redevelop in those areas. Focusing on corridors and hotspots, there's been a lot of discussion about mixed-use corridors as places for commercial development. Also hotspots, this is a term coming out of the opportunity siting process for areas where things are already happening. So recognizing that there are some areas that are already ripe for these kinds of jobs. Encouraging mixed use, there's been a lot of discussion about not just vertical mixed use, that is a one building that may have commercial above and retail on the ground floor or residential above, but mixed use areas such that it wouldn't be as large of a transformation, but that throughout an area or a district you would see retail, commercial, and housing. So those mixed use areas could also account for some of this job growth. And lastly, there's been a lot of discussion about additional utilization of our industrial lands, that some of these areas, in particular those that are already adjacent to our commercial areas, may be ripe for a widening of the uses, such that you might see commercial uses located in what is currently industrial land. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. When we talk about redevelopment of commercial lands, there's been discussion at the Community Resource Group about focusing on these core corridors. And so these are the 8 corridors that there has been discussion about. I want to be clear in saying that this does not mean that opportunities for job growth can't happen in areas outside of these. Clearly, there are opportunities in other parts of the city, but these are those areas where the market conditions are such that we may see redevelopment of some of these commercial areas faster than other areas. So these are, this map just shows in all the colors there, all the areas that are colored are commercially zoned properties. So it gives you a sense for where they are relative to these corridors. So switching over to industrial lands briefly, this would be the primary land category when we'd be talking about targeted industries. And typically these industries need larger sites, and need industrially zoned sites. So looking at what ECLA tells us about our industrial lands, again, this includes all type of industrial, from campus industrial all the way down to light industrial. We have developable about 924 acres of industrial land. Based on our employment growth forecast and continuing to see the share of manufacturing that Mike talked about continuing, we would need about 490 acres. So as you can see, what this would indicate is that we have more industrial land than what we might need. However, as you may recall from ECLA, that isn't necessarily the end of the story. Because of the way the state rules are written, communities are allowed to be aspirational about what their industrial needs may be, and that could be beyond what your land studies might say you would need. And I'll talk about that again here in a minute. Another quick look at what that supply looks like. A lot of those lots are less than 5 acres in size. So even though there are 900 acres, many of them are very small. We do have about 38 lots that are vacant that are over 5 acres in size, and 5 that are over 25 acres in size. And that last number becomes important when we talk about industries that need larger sites. We know from these companies and the companies that help these folks locate that they're typically looking for sites larger than 25 acres. So we currently have about 5. What I want to do is quickly walk you through where our vacant industrial land is, just to give you a sense for some of the issues that are out there. The first area I'm going to focus on is in the northwest quadrant of the city. This map was showing yellow and green in my duck spirit, even though I'm a Beaver grad. It's not showing that way here.
A little more orangey.
Yeah, it is slightly orange. So the tax lots here that are in the, I don't know what that color is, yellow, orangish color, are those that are vacant. And what the green represents are wetlands that have been inventoried but were not protected by the city. And that becomes important because one of the reasons that we may not be seeing development of these lots, even though we know we've received requests from industries as to whether these kinds of areas are available, may have to do with the wetland issues on these properties and the difficulty in mitigating these. For scale, our largest site that's available is this, the Metropolitan Wastewater Site at 195 acres. You can see there are significant wetlands on that site. The next largest site that we have available in the city is here at about 57 acres. So it gives you a sense for how the rest of those lots are size-wise. This is by far the biggest cluster of large sites that the city has available for development. And there are other issues related to how these may be developing, and we're working with the CRG and a small group of the CRG on identifying what it would take to perhaps see more development on these properties than what we've seen. The other area that I'm going to focus on is in West Eugene, primarily between West 11th and Roosevelt. The only other area of industrial land that we have, there are some small parcels in and around downtown, kind of in the Whitaker neighborhood, and then there are a few campus industrial sites that are available out here on Chad Drive, but the bulk are in these two areas that I'm going to talk about. So in this area, on this map, everything that's shaded purple is industrial land that is available. And again, for scale, this site here is about, 22 acres. And the sites out here in Green Hill, the largest of those are about 10 acres. So it gives you a sense for most of the lots here that you can see on this map are smaller than 20 acres, many of them smaller than 10 acres. And again, when we talk about industrial sites that might be possible to look at for conversion to commercial, you can see those that are close to our already key corridors where we already have commercial uses adjacent. those might be some of those areas we look to for a different use. The last slide that I have is a little bit of what we've heard from the CRG on these industrial lands and meeting this need. So making sure we understand our inventory. It's not enough just to say we have these vacant acres. We have to look at why some of these areas haven't developed, what are the issues involved, what might it take to see more development. So really getting under the hood on our inventory a little bit and asking some of the tough questions. Thinking broadly about the terms industrial and employment, we're seeing a lot of, the term industrial is very fluid. We see a lot of things like Ninkasi, where you have an industrial production use that also has a retail storefront. So industrial doesn't necessarily mean what it's meant in the past. Building on our existing businesses and our strengths as a community, this is something we've heard a lot from the CRG. Focus on those industries that are already here. Also something we've heard a lot about is attracting employers that share our values as a city and that we know will stay here. And that's been a key theme. And lastly, planning for the redevelopment and utilization of brownfields. Or generally, I would think about this term, we haven't quite, what we've been using in the CRG is the term anchor. When we try to say, what do people mean when they say a word? Let's anchor that term. We haven't gotten to that for brownfields. So it could mean anything from a site that just hasn't developed, is there something going on there, or is there really an environmental issue on that site that makes redevelopment difficult? So whatever brownfields may mean, what this last point means is how can we redevelop these sites that we haven't seen a lot happen on, or where there are much fewer jobs than you might expect to see on those sites. That's it. Back to you, John.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Bill, who is chairing that local committee at the CRG, if he has any perspective he wants to offer, or if any of the other members have just perspective to offer.
Well, I think our dilemma sort of in the Economic Development Subcommittee is to come up with some kind of percentage of industrial land, or not land, but a percentage of in industry, commercial, retail that will be present in the future, so that you can make some estimate of what a number of acres you're going to need for each of these and everything. And we're still talking about it. It's a work in progress, if you will. We know what the numbers from ECLA are, at least as a percentage basis. We don't really know. We know that there's going to be some shifts in demographics. The population is going to get a little older, and as a result, there may be things like more medical services needed and things of this nature. So we have some information. We haven't quite put it together yet, and I think that we're continuing to meet here. We had some presentations in the meeting yesterday, actually, and we're going back to the drawing board to expand on some of these things. So that's sort of where we are. We're in still trying to figure out exactly what the future is going to look like, as if we really could. I mean, it's hard to determine this, but we do think we need to come up with some kind of percentages so that we can work into the number of acres of each of these different types of land that's needed. So hopefully that gives you a little insight to what we're doing.
Thanks, Bill.
Anybody else want to add just a perspective?
I would just add that, underscore one of the things that Jason said, which is that there's a high need to understand what the numbers mean and to really make sure that we're dealing with accurate information to start with. So in addition to Bill's committee, there's a technical resource group that's going to work on verifying a bunch of the numbers that were in ECLA, making sure that we have the right data to make the decisions.
I would just add, too, the importance of the flexibility between the way we've used the land in the past and the ways we could use it in the future, especially with the industrial land, because so many of our sites for industrial land are an acre or less, which isn't a very practical industrial use, but could be a great commercial use or even multifamily use. And so having a lot of flexibility on how we can use that land can really help us creatively use all the land for one purpose, if not another.
Ed, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
More about the process. It may be a little tittery right now, but I'm trusting what's going to happen, and really appreciate the opportunity to participate in it. It's different, it's out of the box, and I have a lot of faith and hope in it.
Okay, now we'll open it up for questions, and I have Betty and Mike and Andrea in the queue, and Alan. Betty?
All I have is a brief comment, and this is related to the forum that happened here last night. Is it possible to see the slide on strategies again?
Which one is that?
Well, we don't have to, but I think
There isn't actually a strategy slide, but
it says next economy strategies.
I'm sorry, yeah.
That's the way I read it anyway.
Got it.
Okay, we don't have to see it again, I guess, but I think she's trying to do it, so I'll wait.
It's on page 3 of your handout if you want to look at it.
Yeah, slide 9.
Here we go.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, we had this education forum last night. Everyone's concerned about the educational system. That 3 and 5 both really depend on our educational system. And that's tomorrow's talent, of course, that's obvious. And a place to thrive is a place that has a good school system. That's all I wanted to say.
I just want to recognize that our schools have been a large part of the discussion of the group. It's threaded throughout the entire conversation of a recognition of the importance of our schools and their function in our community. Mike, you're next.
Thank you. I took a whole bunch of notes here. I'm going to try to get through them one round, but I may need to, and they're in no particular order. I just kind of took them as we went. One of my concerns I've identified on a couple of times is we showed the goals that JEO developed that hopefully will hit the 3 major ones of decreasing unemployment, marginal wage, and I've forgotten the third one now.
Number of jobs.
Okay. We'll hit that by 2020. I'm hoping it doesn't take us 10 years to get from 12% unemployment to 4 or 5, back to 4 or 5. But our growth assumptions in the ECLA process have in them assumptions about job growth as a percentage over time on that timeline. I don't think it's steep enough. I just want to reiterate that I think we need to be focusing on how do we get closer to that 4 or 5% unemployment number on an accelerated scale. And I don't know if we've got enough built into the process of the strategies and tactics that you're going to be laying before us in order to accomplish that, and I just wanted to bring that up as something I hope we're going to be talking more about.
Can you just for me, can you clarify that a little bit more when you talk about that? Is it more job growth earlier in the years? Okay.
I'd like to see us trying to accelerate, because I think it was like a 1% or less than 1% a year growth rate in number of jobs in the ECLA assumption, so that it takes us 10 years to get back to what we previously called normal. And I'm hoping it doesn't take us that long, that we're looking at accelerating that. And strategies to get it done. Number 2, of the 924 acres of wetlands that were listed there as, current industrial acreage, you showed the slide that listed, and it showed so much of it with recognized wetlands in it. The very first motion I made at this table when I very first started was to begin the process to rezone some of those acres because we know that we can't develop on them for industrial, and over the course of the last 4 years, I think we've seen just that, is that we haven't been able to develop industry on those acres because there's an interest in seeing us not do so. So if we're not going to rezone them, at least I'm hoping that we are taking into account that we're not saying, oh, but those can be built on, and having faulty assumptions about what can be done with them, and perhaps looking at what the state gives us as greater flexibility in order to add more industrial acres, and especially the larger sized ones, in the part of this process, so that we can get actually buildable acres inside that mix. How am I doing for time? I'm going to need a second round, Mayor.
Okay, Andrea.
So, Mike, you just gave me a big puzzle because, there are wetlands out in the west part of town, and when you try and build on those aren't very successful. So, but I think I heard you say was that you wanted to make sure that when we're doing the Envision Eugene process that we take that into account, that those aren't buildable on. and that we kind of, mix the numbers up so that we do have the amount of numbers that we need, because the wetlands are problematic on building on. Not because you're environmentally conscious or that you want to make sure that those wetlands stay, but I mean, the reality
You can assign my motives any way you like. That's
No, I know we
perfectly
just had
fine.
that conversation, so. Erases.
If that was a question, I'll be happy to
No,
answer.
that's okay. No, I just kind of wanted to clarify, I just wanted to clarify my mind. So, we talk about job creation, and I am all for people going to college, and I'm all for people, getting in the industry, into positions where they can work with their brains and not with their back. But I'm really kind of concerned because I don't see anything about encouraging that kind, the blue collar kind of work, the backbone of this community work. And one of the things that's in my ward is the railroad. And when we talked to the railroad, we all had dinner with them. And I had a couple conversations individually with some of the people who were in positions of power, in my opinion. Their commitment was to bring the railroad back up to a higher function. And I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, because I really think that that is a pathway for the kids that aren't college-bound. Those are good family wage, solid jobs. And I would hope that as you guys are looking through this process, that that's something that doesn't get lost sight of. I mean, it's all wonderful to think that everybody's going to go to college and get a college education, but I got to tell you, it ain't going to happen. So just wanted to make sure that that was mentioned.
George? Oh, you're in the queue, George, sorry. You're after Alan and Chris.
My next. So, on slide 18, which is the commercial lands one, if I understand it right, we have a need of 486 acres, and we have 88.
Correct.
So there's a deficit of 398. Correct. And then industrial, a couple slides forward, slide 22, we need 490, but we have 924, so we have a surplus of 424. But one of the issues is the adequate inventory of types of land, including larger parcels, right? And also the need for more commercial. So I could see a strategy where we start shifting some of those smaller industrial lands and rezoning them as commercial, and that helps with the commercial side and lowers the surplus of industrial, but still leaves the problem of the issue of inadequate inventory types for industrial. So one of the questions I have is about, has the group talked about what it would look like to increase and get hold of parcels of land that are 25 acres and larger, and how many of those would we need? I referred to that as going after the golden ring. Not every community, it's very competitive, and not everybody gets to go grab that ring, and sometimes it's a race to the bottom, and the industry wins and the community loses because you give away everything to get them to be there, and that's happened all over the country, and I'm not in favor of that kind of thing, but I do understand the need for more 25-acre parcels. But have you talked about how you do that, what that looks like, and how many we'd need? And
Can I just make one quick comment and then let others, sort of the story, I think Rusty Rexius had an interesting story yesterday, or the day before, I forget which day, and he was talking about, for 11 or 12 years, their company has been looking to relocate their operation from where it currently is off of West 11th for a variety of reasons, one of which is just compatibility in the neighborhood. And he said that the problem that they've encountered is there's just no land available that's of the size they need in which for them to relocate. So it's not just a question of bringing in outside companies. It is also a question of how do local companies, what's their ability to grow in a way that all the right reasons for the companies that we like, and if they don't physically have a place to grow, that also is a barrier. So it's not just the gold ring, it's also the support of the local companies. But others can talk about the other piece of the company.
There's a group of industrial land experts that are trying to put their heads together around what what would need to happen on our current sites to make them buildable if they have potential, and what we're missing. So we do have a site that's over 50 acres, but what has to happen to make that work, and how many sites besides that might we need, and in what parts of town might we need them? So do we need them by the airport or by I-5? And then I think the intent of that group is to take some work to the CRG to bring it for discussion.
Well, maybe before you answer it, I'll add my other question, which was about brownfields. And I've been running around asking people, okay, how do you make brownfields be on the same level playing field as a green field? And nobody has a very good answer. And if you have any thoughts about that, too.
Money.
Well, the only one that's come up is the government buys it, cleans it up, makes it ready to go, and then sells it, and usually probably loses money in the deal or something like that. Other than that, I haven't heard of a single strategy that seems workable.
Mike, go ahead.
There also is a possibility of working through some federal programs with the EPA to first inventory and assess brownfields, and subsequent to that, capitalize a revolving loan fund. I mean, it comes down to money at the same time, but that's a strategy to keep the property in private hands rather than have it publicly purchased. So it remains a private development project with some assistance, typically through a revolving loan fund.
One thing that I learned in the last 2 days that stuck with me, and hopefully one of the group members can help me remember who the source was, but I heard that when good companies are coming to town to look for a spot, we need at least 3 25-acre locations for them to look at as opposed to one, that the number 3, the choice, was important in their decision.
Mm-hmm. Sue?
Well, the last 22 years of my career were selling this kind of property. And I can tell you that to be even on the radar for anybody coming in from out of the area, they have to have a choice. You know, they can't just have one piece of land to go look at. They need a choice. And the reason they want choice is because they want the best situation for their employees possible. And in many cases, they want their employees to have access to places to go for lunch, places to go shop during their breaks, the things that are convenient and that make their life worth living in this community. So that's just for out-of-town people, but the same exact thing applies to the people who are already here doing an amazing job hiring our children. And so really, we do need a choice. We need, in my opinion, we need 10 or 12 or 15 sites in the area that are 25 acres or more. We need a couple 100-acre sites. And it's just good long-term planning, I think. It's like a safety net, just to be on the radar. And then when you hear Rusty's story yesterday about all the people he employs and not being able to find a place to go, you know, that's tragic. So it is really important to have options.
So we have 5. That's just not enough.
But we don't.
Well, they're encumbered in several cases. They're encumbered with wetlands and they're problematic, some of them. So, you know, having 3 or 4 or 5 that are really ready to go is critical.
I guess I would also just add to that conversation that when they were talking about things that were important to those businesses, transit was something that was pulled out time and time again in that conversation, transit access. And another thing that Rusty mentioned was that he knows from his experience that he's not the only one facing this situation. He knows of other businesses that we don't have to call from somewhere else that are here and wanting to expand and have no place to go. So it isn't like we don't have the opportunity. It's like we don't have the place for the opportunity to happen. And I think that's, at least that's what we're hearing at this juncture. So, yes, Bill?
We've talked about some of this in the economic development subgroup, but I had an interesting conversation with Jack Roberts and Rusty Rexius yesterday at lunch, and one of the things that we talked about was if we found some space outside the urban growth boundary and included it to give us some more industrial space, some more large parcels, they probably wouldn't be developed right away, of course, and the fear is that if we don't somehow protect that and designate it as for that particular function, that somebody will come along and say, well, let's build a subdivision there or something like that, and so somebody will do that, which then takes away some of the opportunity for industrial development there because people don't want to live next to an industrial park or whatever. So I think we have to be very cautious of how we do this and try to, if we do find some large parcels like this, protect them, make sure that we are going to use them as an industrial park, and not 10 years from now all of a sudden change our mind on it and possibly eliminate possibilities for more industrial development. So
We also have just part of this discussion that hasn't matured enough yet to have anything happen with it, but there is a discussion of urban reserves and rural reserves and things like that are being woven into this discussion. We just haven't gotten very far down the road on what that would really mean. So although Portland has some experience at working on these things and that we can probably learn from.
Yes. A couple of more seconds. Two quick questions. Residential is 1,800. When are we going to get to that? And then the perennial question for you, John, is how do we get from where we are right now to February, and what does February look like? And you keep refining that, so I keep asking you because you add more to it every time I ask you. So those two questions. The residential, which is even bigger.
Yeah, the residential's a complicated discussion.
Yes.
As we're sort of unraveling that whole piece there. As we talked about in the Joint Planning Commission City Council meeting a couple weeks ago, it's the same track for me with that, is coming to the council with a variety of strategies. I don't want to get hung up on semantics. It's strategies, it's a toolbox, it's, however we want to describe that. But to get council decisions on which ones you're wanting to pursue, willing to pursue, knowing the consequences. I think brownfields is probably a great example of that. Or just talk about the 25 site, or the 3 or 4 sites that are already 25 acres or more. Part of the question could be is, what does it take to make those ready to go? Not, somebody comes in, we'll say, well, in 3 years come back and we'll figure out the site. What does it take to do that? Are we willing to do that? And then be able to move down the road, and what does that impact on the land? So that's where I'm still headed. And it's an iterative process as we continue to go and get refined data. After February, as we've talked about, there will be additional work that has to be done. There is more detailed work on the data and the legal side, but it's still my hope that the council will be able to provide the direction that says, here's what it's going to be looking like. There is the formal process after that. So that's still my hope. So that's what I'm still doing.
Chris, you're next.
Thank you. This conversation really closely parallels the Oregon Business Plan conversation that happened on Monday that I came back all excited about. And that my excitement is even greater with this conversation in mind because there is such a close parallel between what we're talking about right now and what is happening at the state level in terms of the conversation. And when we try to talk about how to get our economy back on track, how to reestablish that, the key point that comes through, which you're also beginning to also voice, is if we expect the economy to come back the way it did before, it ain't going to happen.
That's right.
It is not going to happen. They talked about something like if you created 20,000 new jobs every month in the same way you did before, it would take years just to get back to where we were before. We have to completely have a new conversation about what it's going to look like and what the toolbox is going to be and what the items are going to be we have to do. It's also an acknowledgement that business as usual is not going to work. In fact, that was the theme of the entire meeting, is not business as usual. We as governments, the private sector, all the other folks have to realize, one, they're in a very intense partnership because they cannot accomplish it anymore without each other. And two, they're going to have to move to a model that can compete at a global level. If we just say we reduce services and raise taxes, that ain't going to go anywhere. The private sector learned that doesn't work. You go out of business when you lower the quality of your product and raise the price. Governments can't do that, and neither can communities. So the argument we have to begin to look at if we want to be positioned for the next economy is, how do we work a lot smarter? How do we be more productive with what we have? And there are ways to do that. There are tools to do that, and we can really take advantage of that. Betty mentioned the investment in tomorrow's talent, the emphasis on education. I mean, that really is a piece of it. It's not the whole piece, because if we can be more productive in a position that doesn't require a college education, that can be part of the new economy. But we cannot have the same conversation. It has to change. And so our prosperity really does depend on being able to approach this in an entirely new way. And I think Envision Eugene is an effort to try to get there. But we all have to commit a whole lot more to do it. And the quote that really sticks with me, particularly when you look at the idea of creating 20,000 new net jobs, I think that's a low goal. That's an extremely low goal. We can obviously aim higher than that. But Time Magazine had an article a couple of weeks ago on what Detroit is having to do with its situation, which makes us look like we're in great shape. And the quote there was, it's not the role of government to create jobs. It is the role of government to create the environment in which the private sector can create jobs. That's what partnership really is, and that meant a lot.
George Brown?
Thanks. Well, I'm having a hard time understanding exactly how all this relates to what our charge to the state is, which is to provide pretty exact information about where new housing is going to go, where new commercial land is going to go, where new industrial land is going to go, what's the map going to look like. Do we need to expand the urban growth boundary? Okay, maybe we do. Where is it going to go? These kind of obscure, I mean, it's good to have a discussion about the economy. I just don't understand how it relates to what our primary goal to the state is, I'm trying to say. So that's a little frustrating. I guess I'm still kind of wanting to look at detailed maps and wanting to see, where all this stuff's going to go. And I think an element that has come up in recent months that is very important for this conversation, that I think really we need to blend it in as soon as we can, and that is this issue of, is EWEB going to become, are we going to decide to have EWEB become the regional water supplier? Because that has huge implications for what we're talking about, both economically and for Envision Eugene. I mean, how do we integrate that in? Let's assume, I haven't made up my mind. I'm kind of leaning negative, frankly, but that's not set in stone. I'm still studying it. But if we did, so this is taking this as an example. We're just taking Veneta. It could apply to all the other towns in Lane County, really. I mean, Coburg could want 4 million gallons a day. Cottage Grove might want some. Creswell definitely is a possible candidate for buying water from EWEB. It may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing, I don't know. But I think we need to discuss that, because if we sold Veneta 4 million gallons a day, which is, I believe, that's what they want, they could triple or quadruple their population. Now, does that mean, let's say they don't grow that fast. Let's say they grow by 5,000 people. Does that mean we get to subtract 5,000 from our 34,000? So we're only, because Veneta is a bedroom community of Eugene.
That's how the state looks at it.
Most of their growth will work in Eugene. So we have to take account of that. If we start supplying water to these other communities, then we won't grow as fast. That may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing, I don't know. But it's like someone's going to build cheaper housing there, and people will live there, but they'll still work in Eugene. So I really believe that needs to be made a part of this conversation, and really the sooner the better.
Do you have any responses? Yes, Ed?
I don't think there's anybody in the room that would like to be as precise as what you're referring to as me. And I've had a hard time having patience, but being a part of the process and seeing how it's going, and as earlier saying, I'm trusting the process, this is so much better than the alternative of what we'd probably be looking at. And so what I would ask is to have patience along with me and to trust the process and to know that that stuff is coming. And one of the reasons it isn't in front of you now is we're studying the land that we do have within urban growth boundary, no matter what the zone, and asking the question, how could this be used in the most efficient manner? And it's taken time. And so, I was wanting to see a lot happen in February, and I've let go of that because it can't happen correctly by February, but we are getting there. And I'm willing to invest more time in it to get it there and to get it right, because I don't like the way the alternative looks at all. Can't really comment on the E-Web deal that much, but do know that vehicle miles traveled on our bedroom communities and everything is a very major part of this discussion as well.
I guess I would also point out that people are sort of acutely aware of that we're looking at, how we're supposed to deal with our 34,000 expected people over the next 20 years, but there is a very strong knowledge that we live in a region and that our economy has touches bases with the other economies around us, and so that's all part of the conversation. And George, I think also when we started in this conversation, Council decided as a group that they were going to do more than we were required to do by the legislation. We were going to take a broader look and try to use that information to guide all of our planning processes, not just our this discussion, and that's why we have, I don't know how many different planning processes happening at the same time, where we're trying to look at land use and transportation and our future and all of these decisions at the same time. And it's a big load but important, because people have been longing for us to have this kind of look. And the other thing I want to give people credit for, and this is across the spectrum, whether people come from what you would think is one side of the spectrum or the other in Eugene, what I see in this group, and they've come to already, is that they actually have shared values in the community all the way across. You heard what Ed just said, that they've already recognized they want to get as much out of this inside our urban growth boundary as we can. They want to protect the valuable spaces in our community. There's a very strong across from Friends of Eugene to home builders. There's a very strong desire to keep the livability of our community. So you'll see all that as they present the materials, or if you follow it on the website, you can see that too. But so it's not. It appears to me that it's not that they don't share the same values. They're just wrestling with how to get to how we deal with the amount of everything that we need, and do it in a way that protects the things we care about the most and offers the most opportunity for the people in our community, and to do it in a way that doesn't harm us. So those are all big, gigantic aspirations, I think. So, Mike, you have another round?
Thank you, Mayor. Back to the industrial lands issue just for a little bit. As somebody who gets to serve on the Metropolitan Partnership Board, I know that there are dozens of companies that inquire regularly about opportunities to locate in Eugene, and this issue of appropriately sized lands comes up all the time, or lands that aren't so constrained as to be impossible or unaffordable to develop, comes up regularly. And I would suggest that not only are we not, in focusing on that, not trying to chase the golden ring, we're actually moving in the opposite direction in some instances, where we have the Rexiuses and we have the grain millers who wanted to expand here and are now moving out to Junction City and exacerbating the problem that you brought up, because we don't have the appropriately sized industrial land in our UGB in order to take care of them, and we should. I would say that we have a real opportunity that's not listed up here, I think, in secondary production opportunities around agriculture, because I think that the nature of agriculture in the surrounding areas is changing dramatically, as is the the emphasis at the county level to look at how we create rural reserves and emphasize agriculture, and I think there's a real economic development opportunity there that we could focus on a little more strongly. I do some professional work in partnership with a software company, and yesterday I was traveling with the president of the company, and he said, my problem is, he goes, I need to hire 5 new engineers and developers, software developers, right now, and it's $70,000, $75,000 a year jobs, and they just aren't here. So my problem is I can't get them to move here from Portland because there isn't critical mass for them to stay here if I can't keep them employed. So the critical mass of those clusters, especially in high tech, I think is important, and there are jobs ready to be had right now if we could have it and get the people to stay here. And then lastly, Andrea brought up something I think is absolutely critical with the interaction with rail, not just with passenger rail that the mayor's done so much on. But we just heard the other day from Brenda that they've got the $13.5 million in Coos Bay in order to develop that deep water port. And I've seen the presentation from Jeff Bishop, and the capacity that they're shooting for, if they get that port built out the way they want, is 2 million containers a year capacity. They have to come up the rail, up the coast, and through Eugene to be dispersed. If you do the math, that's over 5,500 rail cars a day, 7 days a week. And I think that the amount of land that we should be looking at for the industries that will support that kind of rail traffic are another area of critical economic development that we may be missing and want to talk about, because I would think there's probably some significant land involved in that, and that work is going forward.
Certainly, you can't have the passenger discussion without the freight discussion. They actually share the same line, so. George.
Mm-hmm.
George.
I just have one question. There's been all this talk recently about brownfields. So, do we have a map of the brownfields that we can? Do we have
There's some state inventory of brownfields in the community. Actually, we were unsuccessful applying to the EPA on 2 different grant rounds, trying to get some funds to do more thorough inventory of brownfields. The issue, of course, is that brownfields, what we would call brownfields, is actually someone else's property, and they don't necessarily talk about all the conditions attendant to their property. So you really have to do that in a very focused way, and we have sought those resources in the past, and we'll continue to do that through future grant rounds.
Okay, well, because the ones, when you're going to, you don't even need a land use map, you can just spread out a road map, and you go, okay, all along the railroad track, those are brownfields. I'm familiar with downtown, I've been down here all these years. I know where all the gas stations used to be, the cleaners, those are all brownfields. You pop off the cement or the asphalt, and underneath, you got a problem. You have a serious scrub the soil problem and spend a hell of a lot of money. So I was more thinking of larger industrial sites other than the obvious ones. Thanks.
I guess the only thing I would add to this conversation is, just it seems like we ought to mention it while we're doing it, is that we have this rather significantly large empty site up the out west Eugene, the Hynix site, and that used to have 1,100 employees in it. It would be nice to have 1,100 employees back in it, and so whatever we can do to focus on the usage of that, it's not ours, but whatever we can do. And the other thing that came to my mind is, as you work your way through this, we're going to be trying to do a Eugene Counts report card on how we're doing on things, and so the more specific we can be about what we hope to achieve in the next year in terms of moving the dial on all of these things, and then look and see how we're doing it, is probably one of the most having advice about that could be really helpful for us to be able to really have specific goals in front of ourselves.